health resort, and in many years, the most visited public health resort in the country. So today we might imagine it as the beginning of wellness tourism, or the beginning of some early forms of holistic health that, again, can be told here as well as any place. So Hot Springs was probably, arguably, the most important health spa in the United States. So in the late 1800s, if you needed to be able to heal a wide number of the population of the United States, and you didn't have enough hospitals and you didn't necessarily have enough proven medicine, clean water was probably the most important public health benefit that you could find in the United States. And so it's all over the country. And there's 500 places around the United States that you would go to. Hot springs, cold springs, you probably heard of some of them. But hot springs was always the most important of all of those places. And so here we have as good a place as anywhere in the United States to tell about how millions of Americans tried to feel better, tried to find health, tried to find hope 100 years ago. Sure. So to me it's really important that here in Arkansas, we understand that Hot Springs is home to the oldest national park in the country. It's pretty amazing, right? We have this national park system, and the first ever of it is here in Hot Springs. The Buffalo National River is also the first designation for a federally protected scenic river. And so Hot Springs and Arkansas as a whole is really important in the history of the national parks. And today the national parks are one of the most popular places to go in the United States. We get over 300 million visitors to the National Park Service as a whole, and about 2.5 million visitors to Hot Springs. We're one of the most visited parks in the country, and probably one of the most visited tourist destinations in the state of Arkansas. And so when you walk around Hot Springs today, whether you're in the bathhouses, or you're on the trails, or you're in the mountains, or you're drinking the water, we still find rejuvenation and joy in these parks in a similar way to people, for the last 10,000 years, but certainly for the last 200 years. And on March 4th, we turn 105 years old as a national park, and on April 20th, we turn 194 as a federal reservation. And so we have this centuries-old history here in Hot Springs of healing the people of the United States. A lot of the Negro League baseball players would be recruited from Hot Springs as they were training with MLB. Medically assess and also viable for fitness, or not fitness, but within mainstream acceptance. This bathtub is the standard setter for hydrotherapy, which is one of the most ancient forms of medical care in the world. No big deal. So, we come to these bathhouses today, especially we walk into the Fordyce, where a lot of visitors walk into the Fordyce, so they see the most elegant of the historic bathhouses. And they do have a cost, right? So this is the first federal health resort, and for the resort to be able to operate, they needed to have private bathhouses. And so there was always a cost associated with the bathhouses. And the federal government would try to maintain a low cost so that everyone would have a chance to be able to come to Hot Springs for healing. And so the Fordyce was the most expensive, and they would go down the line in cost and refinement. And so there were some bathhouses that were half the cost of the Fordyce. And in fact, Hot Springs also had what was called the government-free bathhouse. and the government-free bathhouse was the first and perhaps only ever federal free medical bathing facility in the history of the United States. So even if you couldn't afford to come and pay for a bath, the healing waters were here for you. So the idea of hot springs was that everyone across the country should be able to come for healing from the waters. When the railroads arrived in the 1870s, investors saw an opportunity. They said that, oh, maybe we can get more people to come into hot springs, not just the most sick, but maybe like the sort of sick. And let's also cater to people who need health, need to go on a vacation, but want a little bit of refinement. And so Fordyce came in and worked with the first owners of what's now the Arlington Hotel. He helped to build precursors to this building. So there was another bathhouse on this site called the Palace. And he was really catering to the high-end luxury. But Fordyce himself, Samuel Fordyce, had been a Civil War veteran and had been told that he had 6 months to live by his doctors. And one person suggested that he come to Hot Springs. And he said that after several weeks, he couldn't even move out of it. He had to be carried out of his train when he came to Hot Springs and had to be carried into a nearby hotel. And yet he survived, and he actually lived until the 19-teens. And this was in 1872. So he lived another almost 50 years after he had been given 6 months to live. And so he said that he believed in the healing waters, and so he started to invest in hot springs, both as a park, but also a place of refinement like in these bathhouses. The vast majority of people who came to hot springs were men. They're more likely to go to spas than women, or at least they were 100 years ago. This image is supposed to tell the story of Fernando de Soto. So many archaeologists will grow up learning that Fernando de Soto came here in the 1540s. Turns out probably did not, but the myth of Fernando de Soto was really beneficial to be able to sell the idea of hot springs as the fountain of youth. Because throughout the 1800s and the 1900s, if you're trying to bring people from Rhode Island and Chicago and California to hot springs, you got to tell them it's the fountain of youth, whether for marketing purposes or for actual historical accuracy. So build your marketing into stone, and it'll stick around in your building over the centuries. Which is essentially a high-powered jet of water. And so it's like a deep tissue massage using the water. So you're standing here, and people loved it. They would not get out of the needle shower. And they were like, no, you have a certain time, because people were getting a prescription for the baby. And so you would go to a federally licensed physician. They would tell you what treatment you needed. Then you would come over to a federally overseen bathhouse, and you would receive treatment from trained professionals using perhaps the most famous medical waters in the United States. The showers came along over time, so it's always been about the baths. And so the healing water of the baths either is the hot water, the steam, or drinking the water. And then shower technology only comes about with improved plumbing. Make sure that you had the right temperature, the right time, that you were receiving all of the treatment from your physician. And then you would be in here every day, usually in the morning. So people would just be walking in the bathhouse every day, whole line of people. And this room had to expand to have more stalls because more women were like, I would like to feel better. The water is healing for me. The most popular medical spas in the country for decades. Once you are done receiving your bath treatment, again, it's water in a lot of different formats. So it's not just sitting in the tub, you're also drinking the water. And in this room, the pack room, you are lying on a bed, you are wrapped in warm towels. So you can see our setup here reflecting that 1915 appearance. And water comes out of the sink, the bath attendant is going to heat them up. And you're lying there and you just wrap your whole body. They say, what hurts? Knee, back, head. And then 20 minutes later they come back and they shake you on your shoulder and they ask you, would you like another towel? And you say, yes, because that sounds wonderful. But at this point you're like, you've already been in the bath, you've had some water, you've been wrapped up, you've been in steam, and so you're like half passed out. So you're like, yes, that would be fantastic. And this is my favorite part of the whole process. So this procedure of bathing, drinking the water, sitting in the steam, getting wrapped up, it dates back to the 1870s. But there are still bathhouses today that use that same process. It's sort of the traditional bathing method here in Hot Springs. It really wasn't a place where a lot of people could come to bathe for medical purposes. And so in the 1830s especially, people start building basically these shacks, these huts, and with these bathhouses that basically had a steam room and maybe a wooden bathtub, more and more people were able to come to Hot Springs at the same time, have some of the hot water treatment. And then by the late 1800s, those early wooden shacks had become these really beautiful wooden Victorian era bathhouses that were part sort of hospital and then part luxury spa. And then by the late 1890s and early 1900s, those Victorian bathhouses were replaced with these sort of grand, again, hospital spas that we see today that are brick and beautiful and ornate and also places of healing. And in this room is another exhibit space. You can also learn about the water itself. So this water that lands, that emerges from the hot springs, has undergone a heating process and a purification process that takes thousands of years. So when you touch the water, it's the first time since the age of the pyramids this water has seen the light of day. And so you're directly in some rainstorm over Arkansas. It's 4,400 years old. And it lands in the high forested ridges nearby. So as you drive in and around Hot Springs, if you see high forested ridges east of the park, it's a good chance it's in what's called the recharge zone. All the hot water that comes out begins in the recharge zone. It's a giant underground funnel, and it collects that water. And that recharge zone is extremely important. We need the ecosystem to be intact. We need the mountains to stay at the right elevation. We need the surface to be permeable, right? We need the water to be able to soak into the ground. And the maintenance of that healthy recharge zone is what allows the water to go down through the rocks, get heated, and then zoom back up this fault line that brings the water right along Bathhouse Row. So we have a fault line right underneath these buildings, and it's like a giant straw or chimney that brings that heated water from down below back up to the surface. When that water comes out, it's as naturally purified, as clean and potable as any spring water you're going to be able to find on Earth, which is pretty neat. Extremely special. I'd say this is where nature and history meet. So it's unique as a national park because most national parks are often seen as just these grand landscapes, but here the natural resource is used by people for a purpose. concentration of historic bathhouses in the United States. There used to be 23 of them. Again, a million baths a year, basically, were delivered in these bathhouses from the most ornate and also the government-free bathhouse that I was talking about. And so this was, then that means that we have postcards from people who visited here from all over the world and sent those postcards back home. So just a lot of people saying, hey, I got here 2 weeks ago, I'm finally feeling better. I think this trip was worth it. Places, and you'll see thermophiles of heat-loving organisms and a lot of like Yellowstone. Here in Hot Springs, we are 900 miles away from the closest hot springs of a similar temperature. So we're sort of an isolated place for thermophiles. And when scientists don't usually think about hot springs as a place to come and study, but scientists will come here with somewhat of frequency, and basically every 10 years there'll be an article that says that here from Hot Springs was found a new genus and species of life, which is pretty stinking amazing. That these hot springs hold, some of scientifically important forms of life. So to think about it, it's sort of like yogurt. So it's like a natural yogurt kind of thing, like a Greek yogurt. It's not absolutely accurate, but that's a way to think about this algae. So it is a thermophilic Galapagos. So here in Hot Springs, you can study and find thermophiles that may not be found anywhere else on the planet.